Thank you all for joining us today. I think we're just going to give another minute due to the lag in letting people in from the waiting room, and we will be beginning shortly.
There I am. All right.
All right. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started now. So welcome to the information session for the Youth Development Division 2325 Re-engagement Opportunity Grants Request for Application. We are so thrilled to see so many of you joining us to this first YDD Youth Grants info session of this season. Please note that the presentation is being recorded and the presentation will be posted to the YDD website after we are done today. My name is Molly Burns. I am a YDO Re-engagement Grants Manager. And I'd like to just take a moment just to acknowledge the incredible hard work of the YDD staff, the YDD Youth Grants team, as well as procurement in really making this RFA launch ready to go for today. So at this point, I would ask just the YDD staff and Bethany to unmute, and we're going to popcorn around just to say hello. So Cord, I will throw it to you.
Great, thank you, Molly. Good morning, everybody. Happy Pi Day. My name is Cord Bucher. I am the Deputy Director here at the Division in Youth Development Oregon, and I'll pass it over to Bill.
Good morning, Bill Hansel, Youth Development Oregon, Grant Manager, Data Guy, Youth Policy Operations Analyst. And I'll pass it on.
I can go next. My name's Abraham Magana. I'm the Community Grants Manager. Welcome all to the call.
Good morning. I'm Paul Sell. I'm the Youth Grants and Reengagement Systems Manager. I'll also be the main one behind the scenes doing chat. Maya will give you a little bit more information on how that is, but know that I'll be on and off today helping support with your questions.
Good morning, everybody. Jared Shaw, Grant Manager and Workforce Policy Analyst. Thanks for being here today.
Morning, I'm Sally Deck. I am the YDO Future Ready Youth Policy Analyst.
Good morning, everyone. Melissa Gallardo. I'm the executive support for the division for YDD, and I'll pass it to Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Solano, and I'm an administrative specialist, and I'll be here to support today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bethany Moreland. I'm the Oregon Department of Education Procurement Specialist associated with the RFAs for YDD.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Detman. I'm Youth Development Oregon Director. It's really a pleasure to have everybody here. Yeah, 9 o'clock. Here we go. We're excited to be releasing the request for applications, all the hard work, as Molly mentioned earlier, that has gone into this by staff and by Oregon Department of Education and procurement folks, including Bethany. It's just been working hard, got some great feedback over the fall, and frankly, just over the years about getting our RFAs out as early as we can so that folks can have enough time to respond and get their questions answered, and then in the summer have that opportunity to kind of get started on the work. So I think, Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna just kind of continue with a little bit of introduction and context, and then I'll pass it over to who's next. I just wanted to take a second to, in addition to welcoming you, to acknowledge that our new governor, Governor Kotek, has outlined a number of priorities, and it felt important to just acknowledge those. You will not see them detailed in the request for applications, but it just felt like it was important to mention those priorities from the top. There are 3 different priorities which are reflected in the governor's recommended budget for the coming biennium 2023 to 2025. You may be familiar with this, so I'll just hit these really quickly. Building more housing and reducing homelessness, improving access to mental and behavioral health and addiction services, and improving outcomes in early literacy in K-12 schools. All 3 of these areas, the education ones in particular, have been a focus of YDD grant programs in the past. And so again, we just want to acknowledge the priorities. Applicants are not required to address these priorities, but are encouraged to express where and how their programs and services are relevant or related. Just to note a couple of quick things: addressing and reducing youth homelessness, improving access to mental health and addiction services for young people, and improving educational engagement and success are all issues that have been in the past and can be addressed with youth, with our grant funds. Also worth mentioning that 1, 2, or all 3 of these could be an aspect of the proposed work or focus, and also just noting that the governor has issued an executive order which directs state agencies to prioritize and reducing and preventing homelessness. So again, part of the reason we just wanted to kind of bring this up. Again, I'll say this so that folks are clear: while this RFA is not restricted to serving youth around any of these priorities or around the risk of experiencing homelessness or specifically designated to deliver these services, we want to point out that there's a lot of flexibility in how YDD funding may be used to serve youth, and historically organizations and entities have implemented a variety of programs to effectively serve and support these young people. And I'll just mention, including kind of the less visible homelessness and houselessness issues around housing instability, young people who may be kind of couch surfing and or living with multiple families, Whether your organization's mission is providing shelter or other services to youth experiencing homelessness, or you're thinking about ways that your programs can better reach and retain and support young people, we're interested in you articulating how these grant funds can support that work. And we encourage you to do so. Our goal is to remove policy barriers and to reduce and prevent homelessness wherever possible. So just wanted to note that, just as a little context, again, not required, but you're encouraged. And I will stop there and turn it back over to Molly.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
Hey, Molly, just before you get going, just to let everybody know, feel free to turn off your cameras if you would like. You don't need to stay on cameras, and many of the staff are going to go off camera as well, since we are working behind the scenes to help support you. So again, apologize for interrupting you, Molly. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So what I have on the screen here is the session overview and the order of topics that we're going to cover in this information seminar. And just to kind of get us started, we've got some housekeeping. So please note, during this information session, all participant microphones should stay on mute. You are encouraged to please enter any questions or comments into the Zoom chat box on your screen. So please put your questions in. Questions will be monitored and addressed throughout the presentation. Do note that some of the questions that we received today may require some follow-up, and those questions will be answered through our official question and answer document. Finally, please note that the statements and responses to questions addressed during this presentation are considered non-binding until published in the official question and answer document, which will be published and posted on the YDD website on or around April 12th. Okay, so kind of to kick us off, we wanted to start with some burning questions that we frequently get some of these out of the way. The Reengagement Opportunity Grant, RFA, will close on Monday, May 1 at 5 p.m. If you're wondering if your organization can apply for multiple 23-25 YDD youth grants in our portfolio, the answer is yes, you can. Do note the successful applicants will be required to document how multiple grants serve different programmatic and participant needs. If you're wondering, well, can I submit more than one re-engagement opportunity grant? You are only allowed to submit one re-engagement opportunity grant for this biennium per organization. Okay, so one ROG per organization. The grant period for this grant is a 2-year grant from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2025. In order for you to receive grant funds, please note that YDD youth grants are reimbursement based. So grantees submit reimbursement requests on a monthly or quarterly basis. And we often get the question, what's required before I can submit my first claim for the grant? And you need to have an executed grant agreement, an approved work plan, and all EGM, so e-grant management system processing and approvals need to be complete. If you have other questions beyond these burning questions on the slide, as I mentioned before, please use the chat box to put your questions into for us to informally answer during this presentation. And after the presentation, all RFA questions must be sent to the single point of contact, or the SPC, as instructed in the RFA, actually on the first page of the RFA packet. You'll see the SPC's or Bethany's contact. And again, note that official answers to both today's questions as well as to questions submitted to the SPC will be published as an addendum to this RFA and posted on the YDD website at the, there's a link actually in the slide deck, and we will be providing the slide deck at the end of this presentation as well. So we included in the presentation Youth Development Oregon's mission, vision, and values. And so I'll let you read that on your own, but just to ground us in the work that the agency does. Also, I'd like to note that we do have multiple RFAs launching at this time. So the YDD Youth Grants Portfolio is on the slide deck in front of you. This presentation is just going to be talking about the Reengagement Opportunity Grant. So that's the topic of this presentation today. You'll notice that the Reengagement Collaborative Grant is grayed out. So the Reengagement Collaborative Grants will launch after the Reengagement Opportunity Grants come out. Okay, so why re-engagement? Why are we all here today? I think that the need for re-engagement in Oregon is clear. Every year, there are thousands of Oregon youth who haven't completed a high school diploma or a GED 5 years after they enter high school. In 2019, the Oregon State Legislature called for the establishment of a statewide youth re-engagement system. And that is why we are here today. The goals of the re-engagement system are reconnection to education, high school completion, career pathway and post-secondary education and training for re-engaged youth, and building and strengthening collaboration networks. So successful applicants to the Reengagement Opportunity Grant will become participants in this re-engagement system. The Reengagement Opportunity Grant will serve youth between the age range of 14 to 24 years. So for this biennial grant, the age is up to 24 years for the Reengagement Opportunity Grant. Reengagement Opportunity Grants serve youth who have left high school or are at risk of leaving without completing a high school credential. The goal of the Reengagement Opportunity Grant is high school completion. For this 23-25 Reengagement Opportunity Grant, and I will refer to it sometimes as ROG, so Reengagement Opportunity Grant, there are two funding levels for this 23-25 ROG. All applicants must meet all basic requirements as specified in the RFA. And these basic requirements are the Tier 1 funding. There are additional requirements for the Tier 2 funding level. I will direct your attention to Attachment I, summary description. And on the very last page of Attachment I, there's a real quick glance at what's the difference between Tier 1 funding and Tier 2 funding. So Tier 1 funding is in the award range from $75,000 to $250,000. And for those applying for Tier 2, that award range is over $250,000 up to $350,000. And so I'm sure you're going to have some questions about that. So I'm going to power through eligibility here, and then I'm going to pause for some of your questions. So to be eligible, to apply for a Reengagement Opportunity Grant, I have the eligible entities listed on the slide. I will refer you to the RFA section 1.3 for more information on entity eligibility, including an appeal process. If you are not one of these organizations, you can take a look at the appeal process to see if you would be eligible for these grants. Okay. Those to be eligible for the tier 2 funding, you must be a current 21-23 re-engagement opportunity grant recipient, or you must be a current 22-23 re-engagement collaborative grant recipient. Okay, so I am going to pause here before we go into the scope and see if there's any questions that we can answer.
Thank you, Molly. So yeah, there was one question that was posted in the chat about the award amounts, and just to clarify, yes, those award amounts that Molly shared for both tier 1 and tier 2 are for the entire biennium. So that's that 2-year cycle. And as she continues to do these presentations, I see a few more questions coming into the chat. I will be coming on at different times throughout to address the questions. So please keep those questions coming through, and I'll work to address those at the next break. Thanks, Molly. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. So what we have on the slide here is the subtopics from the RFA section 2.4 scope of activities. The scope of activities describes what the successful applicant will be expected to do if awarded a grant. So really important part of the RFA, of course. You know, the whole entire packet is very important to read from top to bottom, including the definition sections. But right now in this presentation, we're going to dig into some of the scope of activities. So hopefully this will help you better understand what the re-engagement opportunity grant is. A successful ROG applicant must serve eligible youth. The eligible youth criteria are outlined on the screen. The first thing I hope you notice is that in all 4 of the criteria, all 4 criteria state that in order to be eligible, a student, a youth, will not have earned a high school diploma or high school equivalency certificate, such as a GED. So I'll run through the criteria. Criteria A is for youth ages 14 to 24 who are not currently enrolled in high school. To be eligible under criteria B, youth ages 14 to 21 who are defined as a dropout, say on a 10-day dropout list. Criteria C specifies youth ages 14 to 24 who are recommended to a re-engagement program. The list of entities that can recommend a youth for re-engagement services are on your screen. And finally, in criteria D, the youth eligibility is youth ages 16, so that's a higher age, 16 to 21, who are enrolled in high school and are behind in credits. And those of you who are familiar with re-engagement, it has the added criteria, the added requirement that the youth have had irregular attendance. So for the basic RFA requirement, applicants must serve youth who have not yet completed high school, who are in the age range from 14 to 24. Applicants are not required to serve the entire age range. So for example, if your proposed project wants to serve 16-year-olds to 20-year-olds, that would be acceptable to meet the requirements of this RFA. Also, the other requirement of the RFA, the basic requirement, is that applicants must serve eligible youth who meet eligibility criteria A through D on your screen. You are not required to serve all 4 A, B, C, D types of eligible youth, but you must serve eligible youth. in your programming. Okay, so there is a difference for tier 2. There are additional requirements. So the first additional requirement for tier 2 funding is that a successful application really must demonstrate that you will serve eligible youth in the entire age range from 19 to 24, and that the proposed project will serve eligible youth who have not attended school for a significant duration of time, such as at least 4 to 6 months or longer. And these additional tier 2 requirements are either through direct service or through partnerships. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the required re-engagement services. For this grant, through both direct services and partnerships, the applicant must deliver re-engagement services to eligible youth while ensuring access to educational services for high school completion. The re-engagement services are outreach services, educational services, one-on-one academic and career coaching, navigation, mentoring, and/or case management, college and career services, supportive services, and post-completion, so that's post-high school completion services for the re-engaged youth that the re-engagement program is serving. As I mentioned, a required component of your proposed project is these educational services. So structured educational services that lead to high school graduation and GED completion for re-engaged youth must be made available to re-engagement program participants. Now, the key point here is that the applicant is not necessarily the entity that is going to be delivering the educational services, nor is the re-engagement grant necessarily the funding source for the educational services. So for example, let's say that you're a community-based organization and you're going to be providing one-on-one case management, wraparound support, outreach, all various different types of re-engagement services. And the youth you're serving are going to receive their educational services from adult education program at a community college. So your application is to demonstrate how the youth are going to access educational services. And just as an additional note, I've included what is listed as educational services in the RFA. Okay. And so here again, we have some differences between the basic RFA requirements and additional tier 2 requirements. For the basic requirement for the ROG RFA, a successful applicant must provide one or more of the re-engagement services as defined in the RFA. And the additional tier 2 requirements are that a successful tier 2 program will provide a full spectrum of all re-engagement services as defined in the RFA, including but not limited to outreach services conducted to youth who have not attended school for a significant duration of time, so at least 4 to 6 months or longer. And a successful tier 2 applicant will also provide one-on-one case management as defined in the RFA, consisting of regular contact with re-engaged youth. And as I noted before, this can be through both direct services as well as partnerships. These requirements need to be demonstrated in the RFA. Okay, So this slide just takes a quick look at re-engagement partnerships. Successful applicants will work with re-engagement partners who will aid in providing one or more of the re-engagement services. There's a wide range of partners listed on the screen. A re-engagement partner does not need to be receiving YDD re-engagement funds, but all re-engagement programs funded through this RFA are required to work with at least one re-engagement partner delivering re-engagement services. Okay, so the difference here for the basic application requirement, the applicant must identify, collaborate with, and upload partnership document of at least one re-engagement partner. And there are some requirements specified in the RFA which explain that if you are the educational service provider, when you upload your partnership documentation, you are going to be demonstrating other re-engagement services. So you're the educational provider, your partnership documentation will demonstrate other re-engagement services for that re-engaged youth. If you are not providing the educational services directly, the uploaded partnership letter is going to demonstrate how that youth, how your re-engaged youth will access educational services. And the only difference here for tier 2 funding, instead of a requirement, a minimum requirement of one letter, you will need to upload at least 2 letters documenting your re-engagement partners. Okay, just a couple more slides to give you the full scope of requirements on the re-engagement opportunity grant. A successful applicant will be required to verify participant eligibility based on the eligible youth criteria A through D that we looked at a little while ago. A successful applicant will also be required to monitor and report participant educational progress. You know, and this may include obtaining partnership agreements such as data sharing agreements with the educational providers. You'll be reporting on the number of credits that the youth have earned during re-engagement, number of GED tests, high school diplomas and GED credentials earned. And a successful applicant will also be required to report individual level participant information. And in order to gather some of this information, you know, and capture it, you'll be capturing some of the information at intake and at exit through speaking individually with the youth that you're serving. Okay, so YDD youth grants have reporting requirements, which is in the RFA section for the re-engagement RFA in 2.4.7. So there's narrative reporting, data reporting, and expenditure reporting as a part of the re-engagement opportunity grant. And I'd just also like to point out briefly that there are also communication and collaboration requirements, both as a grant recipient and then also as a learning community as we learn how to strengthen programming for youth in our communities and across the state. Okay, this is the last slide of this section, and after I complete this slide, I'll pause again for questions. As you're going through the RFA documents and the application, just wanted to point out that there are non-scored required elements so that nobody is kind of surprised. What is this? So you'll notice in your packet in attachment B that there's applicant information and certification sheet. And so you'll be typing normal things that you would expect, such as the organization name and whatnot into SMFI, and also certifying that you understand the re-engagement requirements. And so, make sure that you kind of take a look at that. I'll call out two points. For re-engagement, in attachment B, there are key performance measures which are indicated. And so you'll be supplying annual estimates in a couple different areas, such as number of youth who are out of school that you'll outreach to, or number of youth that you estimate that you'll re-engage in services and serve. So take a look at that. The project title that you provide us can be no more than 8 words. You can see that we'll be asking for an organizational description, 300 words or less on that, executive summary, 50-word limit on that. There is also a budget narrative component to this application. It's 300 words or less. And so at a minimum, the budget narrative must include, and I'm taking this from the RFA directly, a description of how funds will be utilized, identification of roles and responsibilities for any staff funded by the grant. If you're planning on making a purchase of more than $10,000, you'll want to put in an explanation for that. And then also for the ROG, an explanation of increased need if your budget reflects a request of more than $3,000 per youth per year. So, and then of course, I've already mentioned that there's a partnership documentation upload, which is a required part of the ROG RFA process. And you can see in attachment H that there is a sample letter, partnership letter, that can be used to fulfill that partnership documentation. So it's just a template that you can look to see how to fulfill the partnership documentation requirement. I see that Paul has popped on, so we're going to be taking some of your questions now.
Sounds good, Molly. Thank you. That's a lot of information. You're doing great. So just as a note, I'm going to go through a couple questions that were posted in chat. I am not responding in chat directly, so that's why I'm coming on periodically throughout this presentation to help make sure that we are documenting the questions appropriately and responding to them appropriately. Please do submit them in the chat versus an open question. I want to make sure that I capture everything correctly. So a couple questions that came through during that presentation, that last section of the presentation. Tier 2, the only additional requirement is to be a current grant holder. It's no, that is not accurate. There's Molly's outlining several of the other Tier 2 requirements that were on there. And they're also listed in the RFA and throughout the presentation. Question around criteria B, with the age difference. Criteria B is for eligible youth who are defined as a dropout through ORSs. So youth 22 to 24 would be eligible through criteria A if they met that requirement. Criteria C, question was, can a CBO be included in this list? No, unfortunately, referral partners are not listed in the OARs, and CBOs are not currently a referral partner for eligible youth. A question about partnerships. Can the second letter be from an employment partner for those of us providing holistic programming? The answer is yes. Partners can be connected to or part of providing any of the re-engagement services that are listed in the RFA. And then the last question, or there's one more that just came in. What does verifying participant eligibility look like? What types of things might we be looking for? That's going to be direct you back to the eligibility criteria of A through D that's listed in the RFA, and it's the responsibility of the successful applicant to verify that youth meet those specific criteria on it. And then the last question that just came in, will recordings of this presentation be available? Yes, they will. It'll take us a few days to get it loaded onto our website, but this, as well as the formal responses to any questions that are submitted in chat, will be posted online. All right. It looks like that might be the last question. Make sure I scroll down. Yep. All right. So Molly, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we are going to transition to talking about how the RFA applications are evaluated, sorry. And so there are 4 scored application questions in the ROG RFA, and they are listed on your screen. Please note that each of the 4 questions has a different word limit and also has different maximum points possible. So the maximum point possible adds up to a score of 100. Okay, so do note the word limit, and those are real. The application system will actually cut you off. So please note those. I also put on the slide here that the partnership documentation is required, but you'll note that there are no scores that will be assigned to that documentation. Okay. All right, your application responses to the questions describe what you will do. Your responses are not aspirational, not, well, maybe, oh, I really hope it would be really great if we could do. So you don't want to talk about aspirational goals. You want to write a firm commitment of what you will do if you are awarded a grant. One thing to realize is that you must answer all 4 of the application questions, and note that the application questions have several sub-questions. And so you need to address all sub-questions in your responses. So look at the whole question and address all sub-questions in your response. For Tier 2 applicants only, there are additional questions listed, and a Tier 2 applicant must demonstrate that they meet the Tier 2 requirements by addressing all extra Tier 2 questions in your responses. Okay. So at this point, we're going to take a look at how the applications are ranked and awards are given. So the grants are going to be awarded in a 2-step process. And forgive me, because I'm going to jump around a little bit on the slides here, but I just wanted to kind of give you the big picture first. So the 2-step process is step 1, there's a regional ranking process. And then in step 2, any grants that don't receive that regional award from the first step are going to be collectively taken together to be ranked in order for awards to be, in order for grants to be awarded. So let's take a look first at the step 1 regional ranking. All applications received are going to be assigned a region based on your business address. Okay, and this is just for step 1 of the regional ranking. If you do not want if you would like to change your region, instead of being based on your established business address, you want it to be based on where you are delivering your services for this proposed project. Then in the RFA in section 4.4.1.1, there is a description of how you can request to change region. And note that there are deadlines associated with that. Okay, so just returning. So for step 1, regional ranking, the highest scored application for each of the 11 regions which meet the minimum score requirements will be awarded a grant. Okay, so after step 1, then all the applications are going to be put together. And before the applications are ranked, what's going to happen is we're going to first, priority points will be added to federally recognized tribal applications at this step 2 for the all regions ranking. These priority points will be calculated as follows. The score of the application times 1.1 will be the final score with the priority points for the step 2 of the all regional ranking. And so all of the applications will be then collectively ranked from highest scored to lowest in order to award grants. Okay. So I am going to pause there to see if I confused anybody, if there's any additional questions.
Thanks, Molly. Apologize. I was answering a question that came in. So, and I do also want to apologize to a couple people that I unfortunately missed on the last one. So I'm going to go back a little bit to some questions that were submitted. With this becoming more of a network compared to where it is now, will there be any changes to tracking for ROG for the new biennium? So the individual participant data reporting will look similar to the current model. For those of you who are new to this grant, the YDD Technical Assistance webpage has more details on the current reporting requirements. Another question that came in earlier on, can individual schools work with community partners, or does it need to be the school district only? Schools are encouraged to work with community partners in any of that work to provide re-engagement services. Again, one partnership is required for tier 1, and 2 partnerships are required for tier 2 applicants. Does the grant permit a 15% administrative cost add-on for the grant reporting requirements? So up to a 15% indirect costs are allowed, as outlined in section 3.2.5 of the RFA and attachment D that outlines the budget expenditure reports. That is up to the total amount requested, as outlined earlier in the presentation.
And or the federally negotiated rate, I think, went into this RFA.
Yes, thank you. A couple other questions that just came in. I will just address those quickly. Do you have to serve the entire region? You do not have to serve the entire region. It's based off of your business address, established business address. And will these slides be available later? Yes, I will share them right towards the end of this presentation in a PDF form. And we're an online GED program that serves students statewide. What regions would we list? Your region would be listed based off of your established business address to be considered within that. And can this fund additional staff for existing programs only? These funds are can meet a wide array of needs of the applicant. They can fund additional staff pending your individual organization's responsibilities. There's another question that just came in. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause for a moment so that I can address that behind the scenes, and I will go ahead and turn it back to Molly.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm going to run through a couple of points on how to apply for this RFA. And the first point is that the application is an online application, and it's in the SM Apply application web portal. You might see this as SurveyMonkey Apply, SMA. I will try to say SM Apply on the next 2 slides. So the YDD's application is found on the online SM Apply web application portal. The link is there on the slide, and so that should be a live link when you get the PDF at the end of this presentation. I will draw your attention to that we have SM Apply resource links on the YDD website, along with where the RFA materials are. So that link is also provided for you. And then if you are new to applying to YDD youth grants, and so you are a first-time user of SM Apply, just wanted to let you know that they call creating an account registering account. So in those resource links, you'll see account FAQs, and you'll see a link to how do I register as an applicant. So first-time users must register or create an account the first time they use SurveyMonkey Apply. Okay. So the green submit button. So I want to make sure that you know that basically what I have here is a screenshot of what SurveyMonkey Apply looks like. And so the kind of the user interface. And once you have gone through and completed all 4 of the tasks of your application, you have not yet submitted your application. The person who starts the Reengagement Opportunity Grant application in SM Apply is the person who will see the green submit button. So the green submit button will be enabled, and that is the person who needs to submit the application. So after all 4 tasks are marked as complete, the person who started the application needs to click on that green submit button, and they will receive a confirmation email from SurveyMonkey Apply, confirming that you have successfully completed an application for this RFA. Okay, so green submit button, don't forget to submit. And please don't wait until the very last hour, if at all possible, to put in your application. I actually just have 1 slide left, and I don't see Paul coming back on. So I'm going to go ahead and go through my last slide, and then we will wrap up with any other remaining questions that you may have. So in the RFA, and section 1.4 is the schedule. It's on the screen in front of you. This is the pre-application conference for the Reengagement Opportunity Grant. We have a pre-application conference for sovereign nations. The ROG component of that is going to be on March 31st at 9 a.m. One thing that I did not emphasize is that if you have further questions or further requests for clarifications, there is a deadline on that. So you must submit any additional questions that you have by April 5th at 5 p.m. to the single point of contact listed on the RFA. So April 5th on that. We will issue answers to the questions, requests for clarifications on or around April 12th. The request to change region for the step 1 of the ranking process is close of RFA. Close of RFA is May 1st, 2023, 5 p.m. And we hope to issue the notice of intent to award around July 1st for this application. So at this point, we're just going to kind of check in with Paul and see if there's additional questions.
Sounds good, Molly. Thank you. Yeah, there are a couple additional questions. For those of you, I see a couple people coming in with questions. I'll address the ones that I've addressed thus far and then pause for a moment to address the ones that are coming in right now. So a question that came in was an organization created a paid summer intern program for teenagers in Hood River Migrant Education Program last summer. We introduced them to water sport activities as well as training them for future employment in water sports industry. Is this type of program the Reengagement Grant is supporting, and would we be better off with one of our other grants? I can't necessarily address which grants would be best for you to apply. Please do refer to the RFAs specifically that would best meet that. We do have the pre-application conferences over the next couple of days for our other open RFAs. To address the question specifically, Reengagement Opportunity Grant funds can provide post-secondary and career-based learning opportunities for eligible youth. But again, you are going to have to refer to the RFA for the detailed eligible youth and re-engagement services requirements. Can these funds be used to target specific populations of students, or do they need to serve all students in the area? So again, funds must be used to support the eligible youth as outlined in the RFA. And so as long as youth are meeting the eligibility requirements, they are eligible to receive services from successful applicants as outlined in the application. This is another question that was in the same chat question. I represent the department who works with homeless youth in our school district. We have 2 bilingual positions dedicated specifically to working on services for Spanish-speaking youth. Could this fund those staff, or would it need to fund staff who serve all students? Again, as long as those youth are eligible as outlined in the RFA, staffing can be paid for through these funds. Within that. And then also just to note that Molly outlined the individual reporting requirements that would need to be met as part of an eligible youth being served. Another question this came in: with transportation issues being a major problem for rural areas, are we able to use funds for drivers education? So as long as the programs are specifically focused on eligible youth and outlined as part of the application, funds can be used to serve that. I would refer back to the RFA to make sure that you review the eligibility requirements for youth to meet those needs. I see Cord just signed on, so I want to double check in with him if there was any questions or additional comments you'd like to add.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I thought of 2 things. One is that I believe we do have some guidance around acceptable uses of support service funds that I don't know if that's going to be released as an addendum. I'm not sure if that's a plan for any of the grants, but that is something that we make available as folks are building their budgets. And that's guidance that we can provide in terms of what you can, how and what you can use support service dollars for. But the reason that I wanted to come back on is I realized something that I don't believe I've heard any questions about insurance, although I could have missed it. But I'm working with the state's Department of Administrative Services with an insurance risk analyst to develop a guide to the insurance requirements that we have in our grants. And that's something that we're going to publish as an addendum, as additional information for all of the RFAs. Because I know that has been something that's been challenging in the past. The insurance requirements, we're going to do our best to just explain what the types of insurances are, how we determine what's required, and answer some of the common questions that come up, and do so ahead of when we get to the award and agreement process. So I just wanted to mention that's something that we're working on now with DAS. We thought that could be helpful. So if you have insurance questions, please feel free to ask them here or to the SPC, but we'll also be working on providing information while the RFA is open to cover some of that.
All right. Thank you, Cord. And Jared, can I ask you to sign on to ask about the guidance that we have currently for incentives?
Sure, there is guidance on our technical assistance page on the website for what current grants can use for direct supports and assistance. That will probably be amended slightly, but we will work on getting that updated and getting new guidance posted. It'll probably stay fairly similar to what's up there now, but just slight tweaks.
Thank you, Jared. All right, as you're seeing me work on a couple screens, apologize for getting probably too close to the screen. Another question came in. If we list a project partner in the narrative, are we required to have a letter of support for that partner? We have dozens of partners, but providing a letter from each one doesn't seem realistic. Is a sample of the partners' letters okay? Yes, as long as you're meeting the minimum requirements of the application, which is, I believe, and Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, tier 1 is 1 partnership letter requirement. Tier 2 would require 2 partnership letters on it. You are allowed to support as many of those letters, upload as many of those letters of support as you would like to include. All right. I'm going to go ahead and again, we'll hit pause for a second. We are right at 10 o'clock. That was very good job, Molly. We got that moving very quickly. So we're going to go ahead and just stay on the call just to see if anybody is typing on those questions. But I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Okay. Yes, we are nearing 10 o'clock. Hopefully the info session was useful. It's really, really fabulous to see so many people interested across the state in re-engagement. And if there are no further questions, as has been stated, this info session will be posted. The slide deck will also be given to you. Are we putting that in the chat?
Oh, Yes, I will load that in right now. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay, so before, if you want to get the slide deck today, you're going to need to hang on for a second. So we'll load that into the chat. And then, you know, just as you're reading through the RFA, just if you have any additional questions, you'll be addressing those directly to Bethany, the single point of contact for this RFA. And we're seeing lots of things come through. I didn't monitor the chat, so it's nice. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here.
And it should have been just uploaded to the chat. Can someone
Yep,
verify that?
I
for
can
me?
see it, and that is the PDF. So hopefully you have access to that.
Perfect. There was one question that came in during the chat, and people are saying thank you. So apologize if I've missed one. So please hang on. If you have a question that you submitted that did not get it answered. One of the questions is Job Corps an eligible applicant? Again, I would have to direct you back to the RFA of the list of eligible applicants. And if you meet one of those qualifications, then yes, you would be eligible to apply.
Great.
All right. All right. All right, Melissa, it looks like we're just having people say thank yous. I will re-upload the PDF. It looks like a question just came in for that. And if you do not pull it from this chat, please know that we will post it online in the next day or so.
And, you know, I was just thinking, you know, make sure that you're part of the YDC listserv. So if you're not already in our system, I know you found us today. We do not overly spam your inboxes. So that will also be important, you know, just to stay in touch.
All right.
Yep. So I
with
think
that,
we can close out.
Yep, I believe so. Melissa or Jessica, if you want to go ahead and have or sign off manually, those participants that are not YDD staff would be great, and we can go ahead and stop the recording.